Welcome to Math Link, where we're going to connect the dots. I'm Mr. C, and in this lesson, we're going to talk about surface area and also volume, how to calculate that. So let's get started. Surface area is a two-dimensional measure. So we need to understand it's two-dimensional, not one-dimensional. Computes as a product of two linear measures expressed in the units of squares or square units. And unity fractions are used for surface area conversion. So let's look at some examples of that. We need to know the surface area and also the customary units of surface area. So a few things is good to just put in the back of your head to know is that 1 square foot, again, we're talking about square foot because it is area, is equal to 144 square inches. Now you may want to say, hey, Mr. C, how do I memorize this that you put in red? Well, remember that 1 foot equals 12 inches. So if we're talking about square feet and square inches, we're going to multiply 12 by itself, 12 times 12. And 12 times 12 is 144. So since we're not just talking about one-dimensional, we're talking about two-dimensional, that's the key. We're going to multiply whatever number it is by itself again. So 144 square inches equals 1 square foot. Now knowing that, let's talk about square yards. 1 square yard is equal to 9 square feet. Now in linear, we usually say 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. But since this has to do with two dimensions, you won't use 3, you say 3 times 3. So it'll be 3 times 3, which is 9. So 9 square feet is equal to 1 square yard. Now, these are other customary units of surface area. You don't necessarily have to know, but it's good to make sure you have a place to know where it's located at least you saw it, about how to find acres. Again, when we talk about surface area, we're going to have the units as square, whatever it is. Again, if you know the linear conversion, you can know also the square conversion. All you do is squaring the number. So let's look at this example. We want to express 728 square inches as square feet. So let's go to our whiteboard and use the unity fraction to do this particular problem. So here's our problem, 728 square inches, and we want to convert that to square feet. So let's write that number down, 728, and let's put down square inches. And then we're going to multiply it, and on the bottom we're going to have square inches, and on the top we're going to have square feet. Again, we're using our unity fraction, realizing that this number is the same thing as this over 1. Now notice this unit will cancel with that unit, okay? And so our final answer will be in square feet. Now we need to know the relationship. Now normally we know the relationship between feet and inches. So this is the key right here. We know that 12 inches equals 1 foot. But that's only in one dimension. Since we're talking about square, that's 2 dimensions. So in this case, it won't be 1 to 12, it'll be 1 to 12 square. So if you know the linear, you also can know the square or the 2 dimensions. So in this case, to find our answer, it'll be 728 over 144, and it'd be square feet as our final unit that we're going to be working with. So as we do the math and divide, or say 728 divided by 144, that gives us an approximation, if I'm not mistaken, guys, of like 5.055 square feet and I'll put down feet square. So kind of ran out of room to row. So I'll put down FT and then a square on top. Now let's say we want to round that off to the 100th position. And we know the 100th position will be right here. That means we got to look at the number on the right to see if it's less than 5 or 5 or greater. Since this is 5 or greater, that 5 that are underlined in red will become a 6. So if I round this to that, I'm going to put it in black so we get it together. So this will be 5.06 square feet. And I'm going to write it like that. So you also can write it like that to understand it's not feet, but it's square feet. And then circle your answer. Now let's look at another example. Now this writing may be a little different, but it's 12 square yards and we convert it to square inches, okay? So let's do this. I may do it 2 different ways. So let's look at one way. So we'll write down 12 square yards. This is square, excuse me, guys. My S, square yards. Again, that's the same thing as over 1. And we can say multiply by, if we know the relationship from yards to inches square, and I want to put square, so I abbreviate that. And so normally we know that 36 inches from a linear equals 1 yard. But since this is square, we're talking about area, surface area, we don't use 36. We'll say 36 square. So don't use 36, you use 36 times 36. Again, this has to do with the square area. And so this will equal to 12 times 36 square. Now notice that the yards are canceled, yard square, excuse me. And we're into inches square. Now, if I multiply 12 times 36 square, I believe we get about 15,552 inches square. Now notice how I wrote that. So just check my math on that. Now let's say you didn't know that relationship. And there's another way to do that. So let's do this problem again. We're going to do this in blue. So we have 12 square yards, and we want to convert it to square inches. So this is our second way to do it. So we're going to multiply this. Let's say you know the relationship between yards square and feet square. And then let's say you know the relationship between feet square to what, guys? You got it, inches square. So let's do those numbers and see what we get as an answer. Now, what's the relationship between, again, this is square, feet square and yard square. Normally we say 3 feet equals 1 yard, but since this is square, it'd be 3 times 3. So this is 9 over 1. For the other piece, inches and feet, we normally say 12 over 1, but since this is square, this would be 144 over 1. And so if we look here, our units will cancel with our yards, square, feet, square, and we end up with inches square. So when we do the math, 12 times 9 times 144, and we have inches square, that will give me approximation as we do the math. I think 15,552 and inches square, and that's how we want to write it. And then we'll circle it. And notice we get the same answer, even though we had to do another unity fraction. So the unity fraction could be do 1, or you could do 2 unity fractions, or 3, depending upon what you know as far as the conversion rate there. Now let's look at customary volume units. Now volume is going to be 3-dimensional, which we're going to talk about cubes. Unlike linear, it's 1 dimension. Area is square, 2 dimension, and we use square as a unit. So volume will be 3 dimension, which we use cube. So make sure we express that in cubes, units. So below you see here that 1 cubic feet, again, cubic, we're talking about 3, is equal to 1,728 cubic inches. Another one you want to remember is 1 cubic yard is equal to 27 cubic feet. Now, you may want to say, how do you remember these numbers that you put in red, Mr. C? Well, again, start with the linear. We know that 12 inches, we look at the top one, 12 inches gives us 1 foot. And so since we're talking about cube 3 dimensions, we won't use 12. We actually use 12 cube, which gives us that 1,728. Again, you got to know, are we talking about linear? Are we talking about area? Or are we talking about volume? Again, let's look down here. How do we get 27 cubic feet equals 1 cubic yard? Well, linear wise, we all know that 3 feet equals 1 yard. So if we're talking about cubic, we'll do 3 raised to the 3rd power, which is 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. So those are ways you can remember what your equivalent you're going to be using when you use the unit fraction to find your answer. So let's look at some example. Let's see, we got an example here. We do. Here's an example, and it says casting are to be made from 2.250 cubic feet of molten steel. If each casting requires 15.8 cubic inches of this particular metal, how many castings can be made? So what we have to understand is the 2.25 or 2.250 that we have here is in cubic feet. I underline that, so I'm also going to circle it. But we're requiring to have 15.8 cubic inches of metal for each of them. So our units have to be the same in order to find how many castings can be made. So before we divide, and we will be using some division, we got to convert this 2.250 in the same units of that 5.8. So we got to change this cubic feet into cubic inches and then divide the 15.8 into that. So let's actually do that on our whiteboard. So here's our 2.250 cubic feet. And notice I wrote down feet cubed as far as that superscript with the 3. So that's a 3 as a superscript. I know it looks kind of different. Now, what we want to do first is make sure everything's in the same unit. So we're going to convert everything into cubic inches. So I'm going to multiply this using our unit fraction. This would be this, and then inches cubed. Now, looking back at our chart, we can figure out the relationship by this. Again, we already know that 12 inches make 1 foot. But again, this is not linear. This is volume. So it'll really be 12 times 12 times 12. So going back to our chart and going back to our number, we're going to end up with 1,728 over 1. So that'll be our relationship. Now notice this. These units cancel. And so basically we're looking at 2.250 times 1,728, where we have inches, cubic inches there. And so we have to multiply those two numbers to get our answer. So what we end up with, I'm going to put it under here. We're going to equal, and if my math is correct, I think it'd be about 3,888. And then let's put our units. So this would be cubic inches. Again, that's a 3, superscript 3. Now that's not the answer to our problem because each die has 15.8, if I'm not mistaken. And so what we need to do is use that 3,888. And what we're going to do, I'm going to use that number and I'm going to divide it by 15.8 inches cubed. Now everything's is the same. We have to have the same units. Notice we got inches, cube inches. So this will cancel, that will cancel. And so we'll end up with an approximation. You could do this work later on or on your calculator. It'll be 246. And notice the units cancel. So that is our answer right there for this particular problem. Approximately 246. Always want to go up one. And so when you look at, that's what we end up with. Now, there are also some customary units of capacity, or how much it can hold. Capacity is measured in volumes, 3 dimensions. We have liquid, dry measure, and apothecary fluid measures. And so I'm going to give you a customary unit of capacity conversion. Some of these you may know by heart. Some is good to know and see on this chart. Again, 16 ounces is equal 1 pint. 2 pints equals 1 quart. 4 quarts equals 1 gallon. Those are some of the basic things we have here. And then so forth, you see gallons and milliliters, and we're going to talk and liters. We're going to talk more about that later on in another unit as you look through our particular PowerPoints here. Now, I'm not going to necessarily talk about all, and these are some other customary units of weight conversions. If you know these conversions, and you always can look it up, you can Google search it, or you can actually look at some of the stuff that we have on our website, go back to this video. You actually can do examples using these customary. Now here's one example, but I want to look at another one. Let's look at this one. So it says express 0.283 short tons per square foot as pounds per square inch. So what we need to do is basically know the conversion of short tons and square foot. And some of us may not use that a lot, but I wanted to show you using a fraction, using the unity fraction, it's the same idea as before. Now look at this example, and basically what's happening here is we start off with our number, 0.283 in our tons. And then what we're doing is we're crossing out, we're finding out, looking at our scale from what I showed you earlier to see these relationships. And so you may not know the relationships, but some you may know the relationships. Again, we're going square, so know what unit we're talking about right here. And so we go from the tons were canceled, and there's relationships between tons and pounds. 200 pounds equals 1 ton. And then we got relationships between the square and then square inches. And so things change. And so what we hear, we'll multiply this to 2,000 and then divide by 144. Again, what's going to be left over, and let me use a different color so you can see this. I'll put this in green, will be pounds per square inches. And so these are compound units where you have something over something. Again, you just have to make sure your units cancel out, and those that don't cancel is what remains, and make sure it's on the top or the bottom. And so in this case, this will equal to 3.93 pounds per square inch. Why is it pound per square inch? Because the tons cancel, the squares feet cancel, but what's left over, which is in green, is the pounds and also the square inch. Again, you may want to try an example or try this example again to see if you get the same answer, knowing back our charts that I showed to you earlier. Hopefully this helped. And if you have any questions, feel free to go back over this particular video or look at some of the supplementary material we have on our website for MathLink. I want to say again, thank you for watching this video, and know that MathLink brings it together. So hopefully this brought it together. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.